ICQ Podcast episode 458, Xiegu G90, 1 year on. Well, hello fellow amateur and radio enthusiasts, and welcome to episode 458 of your ICQ Amateur and Radio Podcast, supported this episode by our monthly and annual subscription donors. In this episode, we join Martin M1MRB, Dan KB6 November Uniform, Caryn KD2 Golf Uniform Tango, Edmund Mike 0 Mike November Golf, and Ed DD5 Lima Papa to discuss the latest amateur and radio news. Myself, Colin M6BRY, rounds up the news in brief, and this episode's feature is looking at the Xiegu G90 1 year on. Well, as always, it's our very kind annual and monthly subscription donors that support us with their very kind donations, and we'd like to thank them this episode for providing us that wonderful base to help us pay our way. They find value in your ICQ podcast, and as I say, they send that donation to us either monthly or annually, and we would ask you to consider supporting our work by visiting ICQPodcast.com/donate, where whatever you choose to show value in the show, as it goes into the production and keeping your show advert free. So please do consider us and our work today. Right, now we're going to join Martin, Dan, Caryn, Edmund and Ed to discuss and generate thoughts about the latest amateur and radio news, including another ARRL director resigns and Edmund Armstrong honoured. As always, hope you enjoy.
The ICQ Podcast. Getting it said for amateur radio.
Well, hi guys, and welcome to the ICQ Podcast News Roundtable for episode 458. Tonight, I'm joined by Mr. Dan Romanchik KB6NU. Hi, Dan.
Hello, everyone.
Yeah, good to have you back, and I know you enjoyed yourself down there in Dayton. That's why you went with us. Yeah, so that was good news. Also, your side the pond, we have Caryn Eve Murray KD2GUT. Hi, Caryn.
Hello, Martin, and hello to all our listeners this week.
Yeah, lovely to have you on board again as well. Down in my part of the world, well, down on the south coast, about 50 odd miles from me, we have Mr. Edmund Spicer M0MNG. Hi, Edmund.
Hello, Martin. Hello, everybody.
Yeah, well, it's good to have you. And last but not least, over there in Germany, where I'll be with him in a couple of weeks' time, we have Mr. Ed Durrant DD5LP. Hi, Ed.
Yeah, good evening, Martin. Good evening, everybody. Good evening, listeners.
Yeah. So let's crack on. Now, Dan, I took this one off of your blog page, but it's you had a title of "Shame on the ARRL Again." Now, this is all to do with people resigning, and you think it is so that they can fix the voting. Would you want to go first on this one?
Right. I don't know if I'd say fix the voting, but I think it does give somebody an unfair advantage. So what happened here, and this is not the first time it's happened, is that a sitting director resigned from his post with only months to go before the next election starts. And what's the problem with that? Well, the problem with that is that the vice director is then elevated to the directorship, and he can then run as an incumbent, which, whether we like it or not, does give that person an unfair advantage. And I just think it's a lousy way to run things. And like I said before, it's not the first time this has happened. This happens over and over and over again. So I don't know. That's just my take on it. I think that if somebody needs to resign, first off, that's the question. In this case, there was never any reason given for this fellow's resignation. I think if someone has to resign so close to an election, they should either leave the post vacant or hold a special election, or something, because the way it is now, it's just unfair.
Well, I think I understand where you're coming from, and I know Caryn's quite, excited about this, what's happening here. So what's your thoughts, Caryn?
Well, I feel that if a vice director is being asked to step up to eliminate the incumbent incumbent's advantage, they need to recuse themselves from the election, the next election. They are free to run for the director's spot at the end of the 3-year term, immediately following their ascension to the throne, so to speak. But this would prevent them from using the directorship that they stepped into to fill the vacancy. So it will eliminate them from leveraging that advantage. I don't know that that would fly. I mean, that would mean probably a change in the bylaws, but I think it kind of stacks the deck in favor of somebody who is a vice director ascending to the directorship. The other thing we've got to think about is, okay, why is the director leaving? Because this could encourage, and I'm not saying this is the case, but this could encourage some directors to be forced out, especially if a reason isn't given, or if the reason given is, shall we say, suspect. It would be very, very easy to manipulate the composition of leadership in the various sections. So I think this needs a good hard look. And I think, Dan, you certainly raise a very valid point in your blog. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, well, I'm going to ask a question, but I'll fire it to Ed first. Is if a director stood down 6 months after they'd took the role and their incumbent stood up, that would give them 2.5 years as a director. If they then went on for the election again, that will give them 5.5 years without a break. And I thought the guys could only stand for 3 years, if I'm right. What do you think, Ed?
Well, I'll let the American members of the team answer your question there, Martin.
Right. Okay, Caryn or Dan, is that correct or wrong?
No, I think you're wrong. Like if one of the directors resigned or God forbid passed away, and the vice director was elevated, they would have to run again after 2.5 years. At the next regular election. See what I'm saying?
Yeah. Okay.
No, but I think what Martin is saying is that would still, regardless of whether there's an election or not, it would give him a leadership spanning 5 years. He would be elected in the next election, and basically he would hold that office for 5 years.
Oh yeah, but
Yeah.
directors can be reelected. I mean, some of those ARRL board directors have been on the board for 20 years. If they keep winning elections, they keep serving.
Right, I wasn't aware of that. So my ignorance.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah. Ed, what's your thoughts on this?
Well, I think the danger in this is, if I've understood what we discussed before we started this, the vice directors don't get elected by ARRL members. They get picked by some committee in the ARRL. Dan?
No, that's actually not correct. And what happened in this case, somehow the guy who was the vice director resigned or whatever, and the vice director that was promoted director was appointed vice director. So in this case, it's sort of doubly undemocratic because the person who is now the director, who was elevated director, has never won an election. But most vice directors have to win elections to be vice directors on the board. And I know this because I lost 2 vice director elections.
Yeah, okay, so it's an exception in this case, but generally the vice director has to have had some support from ARRL members to get where he is. And my suggestion, but of course it's up to the ARRL how they run their internal laws or rules, would be that if a director post becomes vacant for whatever reason, less than 6 months before the planned elections, it stays vacant. And then you've covered this situation. If for some horrible reason the director falls six months into his term, and then you elect or you then raise up what was actually an elected vice director, then I think that's fair, because he's then going to be doing the majority of the work. But to come in just for the last 6 months or last 3 months or whatever, and then have the incumbent rule advantage for the elections, seems a little questionable to me. But if you had the situation where the rule said if it's 6 months or less to the next elections, then the post stays empty, you'd get rid of this conflict.
Well, I think in nicely that it's not just this podcast. There are lots of people have been talking to our presenters about things that are going on at the ARRL. I would suggest, as an outsider, that if you've got so many things that your members think are bad, you probably need to sit down and do a complete review of what you're doing and clean your act up and make it simpler so people understand what's going on. Would you agree, Edmund, or not?
Well, like you, Martin, I'm an outsider. I'm not, and I never have been a member of the ARRL, so I don't have an axe to grind in any particular direction. And I'm also slightly mindful of the fact that there's nobody from the ARRL here on the podcast to defend themselves. So with that in mind, I would have thought that the simplest solution would be that whenever anybody resigns, irrespective of how far or not they are into their term of office, that triggers an election instantly without an incumbent, and that would solve it, wouldn't it?
Well, that's another way of doing it, but I think the problem is that we look at what's in place at the moment, and sometimes it looks far too complicated. I mean, I'm looking at it from the outside, and a lot of what the ARRL appear to be doing looks quite complicated. Now, they could tell me to go away, and they're quite entitled to, but we seem to, Dan, and I know you've picked this one up, and Frank has picked a number of things up. There's a lot that doesn't seem right within the rules. So I think they probably need to have a refresh somewhere along the line to try and sort it out. Am I right, Dan, or not?
Well, I mean, that would be one way to do it, but that would probably be too much work. Trying to start from scratch. But, all these other rules that they have that's a whole nother program, in other words. I'm just picking on this one particular situation because, it's happened multiple times, and in my humble opinion, it's unfair. So that's my, and the bad part about this is that people, hams aren't dumb people usually. And they see that this kind of situation is unfair. And what happens? They just, they either, don't vote, in which case they really can't complain about it. Or I think what happens more often is they just quit. They just quit the ARRL, and that's bad. I mean, the ARRL has seen steady, if not dramatic, drop in membership, and I think stuff like this is one of the reasons. Yeah,
it's an interesting one. I wonder whether, as I say, I keep coming back to this, but I wonder if some of their rules are so antiquated. Maybe if they had a real good look at them and cleaned them up and got rid of the useless ones, and then just effectively, like you guys have said, if somebody stands down, you either leave the post empty or you put in place an extra election for that position.
You know what the one problem with opening the process up to that kind of thing is that they'd screw everything up even worse. I mean, they took a look at these election rules because of what happened with the disqualifications in the last one, and in my humble opinion, again, they've made the situation even worse. If we threw the whole thing open, I mean, who knows what we'd get out of it?
Well, yeah, that's why. Okay, that's why I think a reform would be probably the right way to go.
Well, I just want to jump in and say, at least for here, and this kind of mirrors local politics in government outside of the realm of amateur radio. When we have in our local government here in New York a vacancy, there is a special election that's held. It seems to work fine. We had, without naming names, we had one member of Congress step down after some disgrace, and there was a special election, and that's fine. And we do have them on a semi-regular basis, it seems these days. So there's really, I see no harm in that. That let candidates have a fair shot at it, and anybody could run, including the vice director, if he or she saw fit to be a candidate. So I don't see a problem with that. I can't imagine it costs very much to do something like that.
Well, I think that's what the ARRL would object to, and it would be one of their objections, that it just costs too much.
Well, our membership fees went up. I think they can maybe find the money. Maybe. I paid more
Maybe.
to rejoin.
Sorry, Martin, my mic, I'm having internet connection problems, so I keep dropping out at fairly regular intervals, so I missed much of what's just been said, but just a few completely random thoughts from my end, if I may. Number one, the position being vacant for 6 months or up to 6 months. 6 months feels quite a long time, and if a position was vacant for that long and the world kept on turning without any obvious major problems, I would then be tempted to ask myself the question, well, do we actually need anybody in post at all? Number two, I wouldn't assume automatically that being the incumbent automatically gains you an advantage. Yes, doubtlessly there are many instances where it does. If your predecessor, who was in post for 2 years and 3 months, didn't do a particularly good job, you could come in for the remaining 9 months and do lots and lots of wonderful things and say, well, look at what I achieved in a relatively short space of time when my inferior predecessor was in post for over 2 years and he didn't manage half of that. So yes, that could happen, but the reverse of that is also true. If you're a Common or Garden ARRL member and you are Mr. or Mrs. Angry for whatever reason, then when the new person comes in for the remaining 6 months or whatever it is, the ire that you would have been aiming at their predecessor, presumably you would then turn on them instead. So yeah, maybe it's an advantage being an incumbent, but I wouldn't suggest that it's the be-all and end-all. And final thought, I'm not sure about this idea of saying, well, if you come in and fill the position for the last 6 months or however long it is, then you should be disqualified from standing in election straight away, not forever and ever, but in the election that comes up straight away, because to my simple mind, I think that would feel like a disincentive to do anything really. If I was in that position and I really wanted the gig, well, where's the incentive for me to do a really good job for the next 6 months if I know full well that whether I do a great job or a terrible job or anything in between, I'm not going to be able to be elected. Just a few random thoughts there, Martin. Back to you.
Yeah, the random thoughts are very, very valid. And as I say, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. You know, I can see where Dan's going. I can see where you're going. I can understand Karen's position and Ed's. You know, I just hope the ARRL gets their act together soon. So we don't have to mention these things to try and keep them to task. Right. Any last words from any of you guys before we move on to the next news story? Right. So our next news story, and this one was an interesting one. The Iranians SES honours Persian Gulf history. Now, I know when we were talking about this earlier, Caryn said anybody who talks about the Persian Gulf usually has the word war in the sentence somewhere. But this was more than that. This was a group of hams putting on a special event and promoting amateur radio. Caryn, do you want to go first on this one?
Absolutely. Thank you, Martin. Echo Papa 2 Persian Gulf. It was on the air for maybe 16 hours. It's a one-day event, June 7th. So, listeners, you did miss it, but there's a message here, and it's an important one. I love this story because this is what special events should do. Well, ham radio in general, but special events most particularly. They foster communication and friendship, education. Everybody knows the Persian Gulf from the headlines, but how many of us know the Persian Gulf from history? And I was delighted to get a response from one of the ops, the fellow who actually managed the QRZ page, Mortenza, who was letting me know that 11 ham radio operators, each operating from their own QTH throughout Iran, went on the air. And the focus was not, oh, let's work as many folks locally as we can. No, no, they wanted DX. And many of them only had as much as 100 watts. And they operated sideband, which is wonderful considering anyone listening who's tried to get on the air and has been aware of band conditions. This is quite a challenge. These guys had great success. They had 360 QSOs and they reached 60, that's 60 DX countries across Europe and Oceania, Asia, and the Americas. I'm sorry I missed them. I really would have loved this. This is a great thing. They want to do it again, so there's always next year, and who knows, they may decide that they like being a team, and they're going to do more things celebrating the history of that country. This is what we need more of. We really do. We need people getting on the air and fostering understanding. Ham radio is not political, it's educational. So, bravo. Bravo to this station. It was they're very, very happy, and when last I heard from Mortenza, they were already sending out the QSL cards. Back to you, Mort.
Yeah, very positive, Caryn, very positive. Now, Edmund, I know this has happened, and I know you thoroughly enjoy working special event stations. If it happens next year, you can have a go.
If it happens next year, yes, indeed. The QRZ.com page, which is well worth looking at, only makes reference to 2025. Now, I'm hoping that that is purely because at the time of recording, we're still in 2025 and that they'll do it again in future years and update their QRZ.com page nearer the time. I hope it's that rather than the event being just a one-off, but I would really like to get the call sign in my log because it is rare enough for me to hear Middle Eastern stations on HF SSB, with the exception perhaps of Israel sometimes on 20 and 17 meters. I've never worked or heard Iran at all, I think, let alone a special event station from there. And so, yes, in 2026, if they do it again, I will certainly do my darndest to get the call sign in the log. And I absolutely agree with Caryn that it's a good example of what amateur radio can be and should be, the friendship and apolitical nature of it on the air. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, good news on that one, Edmund. And let's hope they do it next year. Ed, you got thoughts on this one?
Yeah, the points on this are made well by Caryn and by Edmund there, that the special event stations are to celebrate something in history and to educate about history or educate about a good cause. And as Caryn, Edmund and myself are all involved in the International Dog Day and International Cat Day that's coming up in August, we know this very well. What I do find, though, and this has been shown here, we seem to hear about special event stations after they've happened. Now, in things like DXpeditions, there are websites like DX World, I think is one of them, but there's 2 or 3 of them anyway, that actually list what's coming up, give you a bit of information, give you some pictures about what's coming up so you can see what's happening. And it's a bit of a shame that there isn't the same thing for internationally for special event stations. I believe from what we discussed before starting the recording, the ARRL has effectively a calendar of special event stations coming up. But I'm thinking more of a almost like blog style, like the DX World is, where there's a little bit of information, background information, who's taking part and so on. And no, I'm not volunteering, and ICQPodcast is not volunteering to put this on. But if anybody else thinks they can put together a website that will show what's coming up in special event stations worldwide, good luck to them, and please take the idea and run with it. That's all I've got to say. Congratulations to the team in Iran, and congratulations to all and every special event station team across the world for all the events that come up. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And yes, Ed's right. ICQ can't pick up this website that you were talking about because I'm not a web developer. In fairness, I'm not a web developer. I couldn't do it properly and good. And if you can't, you have to accept my limitations at times. Dan, what's your thoughts on this special event?
Well, I like special events, so I'd say good on them for doing this. I did check the ARRL special events page, and I paged through all of them, all the listings. The listings do give a little bit of information about the special event and who to contact, so there is that. But unfortunately, I didn't see any international special events. I don't know that they would be averse to including international special events, but they just don't seem to have any.
Perhaps nobody's sending any in, which would would be a reasonable thing if people don't know.
Well, right. So what I was going to do, but of course this is already passed. I was going to put in the information from this item and see if they would list it. But since it's already passed, I guess that's.
Karen will supply you some information to try and put in.
Yeah, if we're an international podcast, so I'll extend that invitation to everybody else. If they have a special event in whatever country, send me the info and I'll submit it to the ARRL, and maybe they'll get it on that page.
Well, that sounds like a good one, Dan, and thank you for suggesting that. That's a good one. Right, moving to our next news story. And I know this is a state story, but I'm going to give it to Ed first. Indiana Emcomms are switching over to digital communications. I am big into digital communications. However, I'm not so sure about this one, Ed. What do you think?
The point I think that everybody's going to pull up on this, but I've actually got a different point I'll come to at the end of. Actually, I'll pass it back to you, and I'll come back with another point after the other people have spoken about this. But I think the point that everybody reads in this article is they're going to Xiegu Fusion, and in so doing, it looks like they're going to cut out a lot of people who don't have Xiegu equipment that used to be part of Sky One and other emergency communication services because the Dubois County Office of Emergency Management, who sponsor a amateur radio repeater, have decided with the repeater owners, obviously, to switch from analog FM to C4 FM to Xiegu Fusion because they believe the quality and therefore the accuracy of the received signals will be better. The point I think I would make is if you go into a digital mode, why don't you go to the one that's A, the most common, and B, the cheapest, which would be DMR. The alternative would be D-Star. Sorry, Xiegu, but number 3 on the list on usability. As far as I know, it might be different in this area of America, but it doesn't seem to be from what the report says, would be Xiegu Fusion. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. And if I could come back in with another point at the end, Martin, to give you another angle on this, I'd love to do that. So you pass this on to whoever you wish now, Martin.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm not going to throw my 2 pence in yet because it might be what you want to talk about at the end. But yeah, okay, I accept the Yaesu Fusion is the easiest one to set up. It is the easiest one to set up. But as you say, there are other things you have to think about. Dan, what's your thoughts on this?
Well, I'm no repeater expert for sure, but I have a question. Don't Fusion repeaters also operate analog FM?
They certainly can, Dan, because the Sutton and Sheen local repeater is either FM or C4 FM, and whatever goes in comes out in that mode.
Right. So in that case, there's this news story says something about visitors driving through the area and hams that only have, FM radios. But in a real severe emergency, well, they could still use those radios. It just would be up to the net control station to accommodate.
Yeah, it's down to the repeater keeper, and they say what you can and can't do. As I say, a C4 FM repeater, the one we have, that, as say, if I send an analog signal to it now, it will respond in analog and it will communicate with other people in analog. If I send a C4 FM signal to it, it will switch over to digital and it will do the digital communications with anybody who's got a digital on. So, yeah.
Okay, so during the Skywarn nets, they just operate C4 FM, and in real emergency cases, if someone's calling in with just an FM analog radio, they'll still be able to handle those calls as well. So sounds okay to me. I mean, having the members having to buy new radios, that's kind of a bad thing. But if they are actually getting some range increases, well, that might be worth it. And yeah, that's that.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure you get the range increase, truthfully, but that's another story. Caryn, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, the decision was made by the Office of Emergency Management in the county. They are the owners. They are the owners of the repeater, and that decision was actually inherited by the Patoka Valley Amateur Radio Club. And that's where a lot of the members were saying, well, wait, we don't have radios. Now, the answer, the fallback position they're giving is, well, the public and any hams who don't have these radios can monitor the net by streaming it over Broadcastify. My thoughts are twofold. If the internet goes down, you don't have Broadcastify. My other thought is, what if you need to pass along some weather information, some ground truth? So I don't know that works as well. From what I heard, this is kind of a done deal, and they're going to make the best of it. And I understand that. But for any organizations who are looking to switch to digital, gosh, I only have experience with DMR. I've never used C4 FM. I have heard it's really super easy to set up, but I think this is an important consideration that people shouldn't be excluded as a result of a transition like this. You're really cutting off willing participants. That it's not a great outcome. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah. Well, that's understood on that one. It's an interesting discussion. Edmund, have we left you anything to say on this repeaters? And do you have C4 FM? I can't remember.
I do have C4 FM, but in stark contrast to most people, I tend to use it simplex. I'm guessing that most people have used it either to get into repeaters or to access hotspots, but I can say from first-hand experience that C4 FM does work very, very well, low signal levels. I have a friend a couple of villages away who I've worked using C4 FM simplex on 2 meters, both of us using handhelds at each end on the low power setting, and I've got a Yaesu FT5D, and I think he has as well. So low power is 500 milliwatts at each end with the stock antennas over a very obstructed path, and we can work each other. Readability 5, signal strength 1, but totally readable. If we then switch to standard FM, then we might just about be able to hear that there was a voice there, but in terms of hearing what was being said, no chance at all. So if the local topography around this repeater is hilly, or there are lots of locations where you would have trouble getting an FM signal into the repeater, then if the rationale for this change was that C4FM will get in from locations where standard FM won't, then I could quite easily believe that, and I could see that as a sensible reason for wanting to make the switch. In terms of equipment, you can get, is it the FT70, which is sort of the cheap C4FM handheld that doesn't have GPS and all that stuff built into it. You can get one of those in the UK for less than you would pay for a brand new ICOM T10, which is FM only. Higher specs, obviously more waterproof, that kind of thing. And you can pick up second-hand C4FM handhelds at rallies, Martin, as you well know, because I think you did that very thing a couple of years back. So hopefully, if anybody was involved in this who didn't have or couldn't afford a C4FM capable handheld, I would hope that the other volunteers would club together and make equipment available, even on just a loans basis. So I don't really know what the true reason for this change is, but I doubt very much that it was done just to deliberately exclude and antagonise people who were only set up for FM. And if you've never done C4FM simplex, try it. You might be very, very surprised how far it'll go. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah. Well, I have, and you're right. I did pick up a FT2D at a rally at a very, very silly price. And I also own an FT70, the cheaper version without all the bells and whistles. And believe it or not, the FT70 actually has better audio, in my opinion. But that's another one. Ed, you said you wanted to bring something else up, so I've not gone with what I think you're going to bring up, so I'll leave that one for you.
Well, I don't think so. Well, let me come back on a couple of points, though, to what Dan said. Yeah, okay, do the Sky One nets on Yaesu Fusion, and in an actual emergency, then you can look at analog as well, because the repeater can do both if it's switched that way. Point, if I've understood Sky One correctly, it's to get information about the weather before the storms hit, before the tornadoes hit. So your Sky One nets are not before, they are before the actual bad emergency, but that's when you would need the maximum number of people from the maximum number of locations sending information in. So, it would have to be that the Sky One nets would have to run somehow C4FM and analog to keep those people, because coming to the point Edmund and Martin just made, why would an amateur then go out and buy extra equipment unless he was really into, or a controller in or something in Emcomms? Why should he have the expense? He's got something that works and has worked for several years. Now he's being blocked from being able to help other people through Sky One and other emergency communications. The other point we should never forget, C4FM, DMR and D-Star are all modulation types on top of an FM carrier. So it's not a different mode like sideband's different from CW or AM or whatever. It is an FM carrier with the digitized audio on top of it rather than analog audio. That means that carrier will still go the same distance. Okay, the audio decoding is probably better in newer radios. Hence, what you were seeing there, Edmund, that you were getting more readability, but not necessarily more strength, but more readability through digital audio than you did through analog. And that brings me then back to, and you mentioned this as well, Edmund, the true reason behind this, and this is important. The true reason behind this suggestion, or not suggestion, this decision from Indiana Emcomm, whereas in the Dubois County Office of Emergency Management, is because they've done some tests and they find that the audio or the signals are not as understandable as they'd like for clear information to be passed without errors. Now, rather than changing to digital audio, which is one way to go, but has the downside of losing 3/4 of your information sources, perhaps, why not improve the repeater? And by that I mean put up a gain antenna, put it up higher. That way, the signals that were marginal and then scratchy to receive will be stronger at the repeater, and therefore to everybody who receives the repeater. If you improve the antennas on the repeater as it stands in standard FM mode, you possibly don't need to go to digital, and you would then retain all of your current volunteers. That was the point I wanted to make, Martin. So back to you.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm going to just throw one last one in. Now, for those who know me and for the podcast, we have a digital talk group where we integrate lots of different modes together, and it works well. However, to me, and I know this for a fact, you have a cliff effect. And Edmund's saying, he's got a very, very weak signal and he could hardly hear it on FM, but it's a great signal on digital voice. But the problem with digital voice is you could move 3 feet to your left, Edmund, and you wouldn't be able to work the guy. Because when the signal drops to such a level, it's just like going off a cliff. So you could be passing information and it going nowhere. So to me, in an emergency situation, I know that I know that FM is going to get noisy. The further away you get, the noisier the signal goes. But you're about to run out of range. Note to self, it's a bit noisy, it's a bit scratchy, I'm about to run out of range. I've got to do something else or come back closer. With digital, it's perfect up until the point it goes off a cliff. And you don't know you've gone off that cliff. That's where I was considering the fact that digital voice, as much as it's great, does have that effect built in. And it isn't only C4 FM, it's all digital modes. So there you go. An interesting one to go on. Right, let's look at our next news story. And I like this one. Broadcast honours Armstrong's demo of FM radio. Now, Edwin Armstrong, and those of you who've done any history in radio would know that this is the gentleman who invented or designed the superhet receiver. But he also came up with how to do FM transmissions in the very early days of FM back around 1938. So I think it's a lovely story that we're actually giving back to the public. Caryn, do you want to go first on this one?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm hoping I can get to hear this because I'm in the region where this transmission will take place. It is a special FM radio broadcast on June the 19th, and it will be W2XMN. It'll be their original VHF low band frequency of 42.8 megahertz. The broadcast starts at noon on that date, the 19th, and it's right in New Jersey. So if you're in the New York area where you're listening, you have a chance. You can also listen. I believe there are some SDR receivers that can also access this. This is to commemorate the successful demonstration of FM that Armstrong did in 1935. FM actually, that the station itself didn't go on the air with regular programming for a few years after that. What will be heard? What kind of programming will be heard? It should be neat. It's going to have interviews with Armstrong's niece, Jean Hammond, and it's going to have an interview with Tom Lewis, who wrote the book Empire of the Air, The Men Who Made Radio. It should be phenomenal. This is a piece of history. This is a don't miss for anyone who geeks out on the evolution of radio over the years. This is one to put on your calendar, and I'm looking forward to it. It is the Alpine Tower that's being used, and that's the original tower that was used in 1938 when the radio station went on the air. And what's interesting is that tower is still being used today for an FM broadcast. It's 89.1, and it is the radio station of it's an academic institution. The licensee is Fairleigh Dickinson University, and that's in New Jersey. So touch history, tune in. It should be great. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, it should be great. And I got this start date 3 years later than 1935. So, yeah, you corrected me right there, Caryn. And I just hope that for people like Edmund and myself and Ed, hopefully somebody will record this and we'll be able to hear it later. Edmund, I know you'd have loved to have heard this live, but unless we hop the plane over to the States, we ain't going to be, are we?
Well, if you have a 20-metre dipole fed with coax in the centre, then that will work as a pretty decent receive antenna, as a 3.5 wavelengths antenna, around about 40-ish megahertz, so close to where this transmission is happening. Depending on what the maximum usable frequency does, it's unlikely that I would hear this on the south coast of England, but it's not impossible. On my Uniden Bearcat scanner, I do sometimes hear low VHF transmissions coming out of the US, usually between 30 and 40 megahertz, though, not very often above 40 megahertz. And bear in mind, this transmission isn't just going to be in the flavour of FM, narrow FM that we use on the amateur bands. This is going to be in wide broadcast FM. So I don't fancy my chances of picking this up, but stranger things have happened, and not fancying my chances is, of course, no reason not to try. Edwin Howard Armstrong lived a remarkable life. It was tragic the way it ended, because the tail bit of his life, he was embroiled in all kind of legal patent battles and disputes with various organisations. And sadly, it broke his spirit in the end, and he ended it all by jumping out of the top of a very tall building, as I remember. So that was a pity things ended that way, but that in no way takes away the achievements of his life, because not only was he involved with the things that Martin has mentioned, he also had a hand in developing lots of other things as well. And in the early 1990s in the UK, on Channel 4 television, there was a wonderful series called The Secret Life of, that was introduced by Tim Hunkin and the late Rex Garrett, and all of the episodes are well worth watching, and they've all been remastered and released on YouTube within the last couple of years, which I presume means that they're watchable worldwide on YouTube. I don't think they're geo-blocked to the UK, but if you can watch them wherever you are on the planet, The Secret Life of the Radio episode is well worth watching anyway, and a respectable sized chunk of that episode is dedicated to Edwin Armstrong and his achievements and all the developments that we can thank him for. So if you've got half an hour spare, definitely go onto YouTube and watch that, The Secret Life of Machines, the radio, and enjoy. Back to you, Martin.
Oh, yeah. You're right on the Secret Life videos. They're good. Dan, are you going to try and listen into this one, or is it just too far out of your reception range?
Well, it's pretty far outside my reception range. I'm probably at least 400 miles away, so it's quite a distance. But I was looking at the picture of the tower on Wikipedia here, and it's quite an impressive tower. And the fact that it's been up since 1938 is quite amazing too. So I'd suggest that anybody interested in it look this up on the internet and see some photos of it, because it's quite interesting.
Well, years ago, Dan, they built things to last, didn't they? Hardly. Nowadays, they knock them down after a few years and it's obsolete. But you're right. It's been up a long time. Almost, it's getting close to 100 years, so it ain't bad. Yeah. It ain't bad. Right, Ed, final words on this one?
Yeah, a few interesting points, actually. Frequency 42.8 megahertz is about in the middle of the Irish 8-meter band. So this is QRM for the amateur radio band again, although I don't think they'll worry too much about that. Yeah, the 8-meter band in Ireland goes from 40 to 45 megahertz. In the other 4 European countries, they only have a small part between about 40.6 and 40.7. So just a small chunk in Italy, Spain, Belgium, Slovenia, South Africa. And yeah, so those people will probably be listening for it as a nice strong signal. And if there's any sporadic about, or if the MUF is high enough, I think, or a combination of the two, considering I presume they're going to be running, did you say what power they're running here? But they're certainly going to be running a few watts. So it might be possible to receive it in Europe, because it'll be a C path, of course, so that will help. Yeah, and for people wanting to listen to it, nearly all HF and 6-meter transceivers will actually receive 40 megahertz. Won't transmit, but they will receive 42.8 megahertz. And with Edmund's guidance there, the fact that a 20-meter dipole, a 20-meter band dipole will possibly work as well on that frequency. So hopefully a few people will get out and listen for this and see what actually happens. But it's interesting that the FCC have allowed the use of this sort of strange frequency. I guess it wasn't in use for anything else at the moment. So for a short test like this, it's nice that they've allowed it to happen on the old frequency. So good luck to the people running this. Again, a nice special event station, and albeit not from amateurs, but from the people, I guess, who have restored the transmitter or whatever. So, yeah, fingers crossed that we have good conditions and we can even hear something from it in Europe. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, well, let's hope we do, and I wish them every success on this one, because it is a great story to finish up on, and good one, guys. Right, let's find out what the guys have been up to. Caryn, we always go ladies first for this group, so you're in the frame again.
Okay, here we go with nothing to report. Band conditions have been horrible. So I've spent my time doing battle with the ionosphere. I even walked off of a POTA activation. It just got to be insane. Came home, tried to chase POTA. That didn't work. I should have gone on the repeater or tried simplex on VHF, UHF. But at that point, I just found something else to do. I think I read a book. Getting ready for field day. That's coming up at the end of the month. And so very excited and preparing for field day. hoping to do both sideband and CW. I think there's a big demand for CW ops, so we're going to be on that. We have a very nice group to activate with, and it's going to be catered, so hey, that doesn't hurt. And yes, the Armstrong event is on my calendar. It's not ham radio, but it's radio, so looking forward to that as well. And that's really it for me from this end. Back to you, Martin.
Dan, what have you been up to since the last time we spoke?
Well, as you know, I missed the last podcast because I was on my way to Dayton, and I had a great time at Dayton. And apparently, Dayton even had record attendance this year. At least that's what they're reporting. They reported 38,600 people at the Dayton Hamvention this year, which was the highest ever recorded. And it was great weather. The weather held up, no rain except one evening, and by the next day it was sunny and warm again. And I just had a great time, meeting all the people I know, and I attended the two POTA sessions, talking about POTA, and those were the biggest sessions at Dayton, and POTA's just going crazy. So that's that. And talking about POTA, this last Saturday I attended what's called the Michigan POTA meetup, and it was a group of POTA operators here in Michigan, obviously. And we got together at a state park here and had hot dogs and hamburgers and had a really nice time. There was over 125 attendees this year, and for that alone, and that was a blast. So that's basically what I've been up to. I'm like Caryn. I'm getting ready for field day. We always have a great field day here in Ann Arbor, and talking about CW operators. If anybody's listening and operates CW and wants to operate with us, get in touch. We run 2 CW stations, and we want to run them all 24 hours. So that's it. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, well, that sounds great fun, Dan. Sounds like great fun. And I've been asked a couple of times, and this is putting you on the spot now. Don't give me a definite answer, but I've been asked, when are you and I going to do another sit-down chat about various bits and pieces like we did in Dayton last year?
Oh, well, that's nice to get that feedback. I'm up for it any time. Let's think about that.
We'll sort something out, Dan, on that one, because I think that would be a good one. Right, Edmund, what have you been up to since last time we spoke?
Well, I took part in 433 Alive, as did you, from a 1-point SOTA summit that was also good for POTA. And we got 17 stations in the log, the best DX being northwest of Oxford from the south coast of England, which is quite a good going. And the date for the next one which is Sunday the 24th of August, which is the August bank holiday weekend in the UK. And that weekend coincides with BIWOTA, British Inland Waterways on the Air. So I think there's a good opportunity to combine the two events. And whether you're up on a hill or whether you're down at sea level next to a canal, a good opportunity to put the two events together. So might be a good opportunity to get some club call signs and some special event call signs in the log on the 70 centimetre band. Other thing that I'm taking part in is Gateways on the Air, which started the day before this podcast was released and finishes a week later, the following Sunday. I think simplex gateways are very much a UK phenomenon. Basically what they are is mainly on the 2 metre and 70 centimetre bands and other bands as well. On a single frequency, you transmit on that frequency, and then the gateway transmits back to you on the same frequency. Some of them are in FM, some of them are in Yaesu System Fusion and other digital modes as well. And it's just a fun event to get some activity on the air and to encourage people to go out and about portable. So during that week, after work mainly, I should think I will try to get myself to a different location each day nowhere particularly exotic. This isn't a de-expedition or anything, and try to take part. So if you're interested, if you're on Facebook, if you put Gateways on the Air in there, the Facebook group will appear. And the final weekend of that coincides with the first weekend of Museums on the Air weekends, which are on the 3rd and 4th weekends of June. Traditionally, the first weekend is busier than the second, and the Saturdays are traditionally busier than the Sundays. It's coordinated in the UK, this event, but it's an international one, so wherever you are on the planet, if you are involved in a local museum, as a volunteer maybe, and you want to put the museum on the air for this event, if you go onto your favourite search engine and type in Museums on the Air, then the webpage will come up. And Amberley Museum, Golf Bravo 2, Charlie Papa Mike here in West Sussex is registered and will be taking part. And I'm going to do my darndest to be down there on the first Saturday of the 2-weekend event, which will be, what will that be? Saturday is it the 21st? I don't know, I'm getting confused with dates here. Yeah, that's right, Saturday 21st. That's the first day of the first weekend. So a bit of amateur radio activity coming up. Oh, and I've also repaired my dipole. My elderly 40-metre dipole snapped in some of the strong winds we've had recently, and it was well overdue an overhaul anyway, so I've replaced pretty much everything, replaced the coax, replaced the wire, and I also took the opportunity to add a 20-metre dipole to it. So I've now got a fan dipole, but it's not... When I think of fan dipoles, I think of dipoles, one hanging underneath the other. My particular one, the 20-metre dipole, goes across my garden, whereas the 40-metre one goes the length of my garden, so they're at 90 degrees to each other, and it works very well. And I did wonder if adding the 20-metre dipole would have any impact on the 40-metre dipole in terms of it being able to work on 15 metres as a 3.5 wavelength antenna. And I'm pleased to report that adding 20 metres has not made any noticeable difference. And the 20-metre dipole, I've cut it slightly on the short side, so it will tune just about on 17 metres. Okay, it's probably not a brilliant antenna on that band, but using the adage that any antenna is better than no antenna, I could press it into service on 18 megahertz if I really wanted. So that, combined with several homebrew antennas that I've been making these last few months, means that I'm all ready to go for International Cat Day all across the HF spectrum at the beginning of August. But we'll talk about that nearer the time, Martin.
Yeah, well, you're busy, and I'll probably join you on some of these events, as I have done in the past. It's a good job you're not doing Museums on the Air on the second weekend, because you'd be in Germany.
Oh yes, that. When we're in Germany, Martin, we're going to activate loads and loads of SOTA summits on 2 meters, aren't we?
Yeah, why not? Why not? We'll see what we can do. We might have to leave Mrs. B somewhere nice, but we'll see what we can do. Right, Ed, what have you been up to since the last time we spoke?
Well, echoing a little bit of what other people have said, the band conditions the last 2 to 3 weeks have been pretty horrific, bad. But despite that, as we've had now a couple of days of good terrestrial weather, we're actually seeing sunshine rather than clouds and rain for a change. This morning, I got out and did a SOTA, a 1-point SOTA, that's also what's called a 3-fer POTA. So there's actually 3 POTA trails and the SOTA summit at the same point, and that's exactly the point where I was operating from. So I did a combined SOTA and POTA activation this morning. It's actually, I checked back, and it's my first SOTA activation this year. Probably my first real POTA as opposed to PLOTA, parking lots on the air. So in other words, not from within the car, this year as well. So I think that officially starts the portable operations season for me. The other thing is the International Dog Day. Been doing some system testing we're using a service called hamlog.online for both the International Dog Day and the International Cat Day, and it's a system where we will put our login into it. Will generate certificates for those who work enough of us to get a certificate, and all automated. And a very, very nice piece of work from Eugene there. So shout out to Eugene. But at the moment, as well as testing there, I'm also spending quite a bit of time via email giving other people that will be involved in the event advice on how to use and what to do and what they need to do, because we need to be ready for August. The stations will be operating, some of them the whole of August, some for just 2 weeks, some for a week. So we need to be happy that everybody knows how to use the system before then. We've also been testing out what the callers can see through the landing pages, and all going well, but it takes a bit of time. Parallel to that, I've got my editing work. I'm working on a new, not a new book, but a revision to a book for the RSGB. That's quite a lot of work, and we'll be having that available from the UK Hamfest onwards. And, of course, I'm getting ready for Friedrichshafen, which is only a couple of weeks away now. So everything happening in June here. So more and more radio, at least. When I can get enough time to breathe, I'll actually try and get out into some of this lovely sunshine while it lasts. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, sounds like you've been extremely busy as well, Ed. Well, I only get to do this every 2 weeks. You guys get 4 weeks. So I sometimes feel like a bit of a broken record what I've been up to. Have been on the talk group a few times. I'm noticing that it's on average doing 7 or 8 visits by people every day. There are still people just blipping it, and I noticed one this afternoon that blipped it on DMR, but never showed up on Fusion or YSF because they didn't transmit for long enough. And there is a slight delay between the different modes in the decoding, which is normal. Unfortunately, though, guys, if you just blip it quickly and don't say anything, and I'm sitting in the shack, I think you don't want to talk to me, so I can't go back to you. Put a call out. Did take my Xiegu G90 to the club on Monday night because a couple of people wanted to see one, and I had some good contacts on SSB. That was all right. That worked very well. My Windows 10 laptop died, or the Windows itself got corrupted, and it said you can reinstall this, but we're going to wipe your hard disk. And I thought, you know what? I'd rather keep me data on the hard disk and put another hard disk in. And seeing as that Windows 10 goes out of support in about another 4 or 5 months, okay, it's gone to Linux early, 4 or 5 months early. And at the same time, my Raspberry Pi 400, which I often run in the shack as a secondary computer, died. Well, it didn't so much die, but I ran out of disk space on it and it corrupted itself, so I had to rebuild that. I was helping one of the guys up at the club with DMR, explaining how the DMR works and trying to get his head around it so he can program his radio up how he wants, which is a bit, it's not straightforward. You've got to have somebody help you, and I'm glad I did when I started. But the last and probably more interesting thing, if it happens, is I've been contacted by the RSGB. There is a school in my area that would like to set up a radio club. And I've been asked by the RSGB, would I talk to them? At the moment, I'm waiting for the school to contact me now. They have my details. And I'm more than happy to help as much as I can. But I think they've also got to understand what they're asking for. So it'll be an interesting one. I hope it all goes well, and I hope it's very positive. But more on that, as I say, if it happens and goes forward. So that's what I've been up to. So I think we've gone quite a few today, and we've been quite excitable, so that's a good one. So all that's left for me to do now is to thank the guys, and before we move on to the next part of the podcast, I'd like to thank Mr. Dan Romanchik KB6NU.
Well, it's my pleasure as always, Martin.
Yeah, great to have you, Dan. No problems at all. I'd like to thank Caryn Eve Murray KD2GUT.
Always fun to be with you guys.
Yeah, we do have fun, Caryn. That's what makes it worth doing, isn't it? I'd like to thank Mr. Edmund Spicer M0MNG.
Thanks for having me on, Martin.
No problems. And last but not least, I'd like to thank Mr. Ed Durrant DD5LP, who we will be seeing when the next podcast gets released after this one, because we'll be together in Freaks Home.
That's absolutely right. Looking forward to it, Martin. And thanks for the invite for this evening, and look forward to seeing you, Colin, Mrs. B, and Edmund in a couple of weeks' time.
Yeah, well, Chris is also going to be there.
Oh, Chris as well. Sorry, yeah.
So we've got a group of about 8. I think originally it was going to be 10, but we've got a group of 8 joining us now. I wouldn't change the table booking just in case anybody else does turn up, but there's 8 of us now. So I'm going to say 73 to you guys and move on to the next part of the podcast. 73, guys.
73.
73.
Keep your amateur ham radio podcast advert free by donating less than a length of coax. Visit www.ICQPodcast.com/donate now. For all the news, links and information, visit www.ICQPodcast.com.
Now it's time to have a look at the news in brief with me, Colin M6BOY. Well, we're coming up very soon to the start of 13 Colonies on the air, and this event marks the 13 original British colonies, along with a few bonus stations just for some added measure. Now, this was a idea of Ken Villone, KU2US, but Ken is passing on the baton of the event to Tony Jones, N4 Alpha Tango Juliet, after 16 years leading, as I say, this event. So obviously we wish to thank Ken for all his work and wish Tony all the best for the future. But if you, are looking to activate some wonderful special event stations between the 1st of July and the 8th of July, I say this is a great event for you there. So as I say, 13 coins on the air. We'll pop a link on the ICQ podcast webpage for you so you can gather all the information. But as I say, certainly this is a popular event that's been running since 2009. As I say, it's continuing in the hands of Tony going forward. Now, of course, our hobby is, as strong as it is for the wonderful work of volunteers in our hobby, and the RSGB are releasing a video to celebrate Volunteers Week in the UK. Now, as part of that is this video that's based around the volunteer team at the RSGB Radio Centre. They welcome 80,000 visitors to the centre every year and share amateur radio with them. So say it's an interesting video to check out. We're obviously popping this on the ICQ podcast webpage for you, so you can check that out for yourself, as I say, in promoting the work the volunteers do. Now, talking about that, those volunteers, you're going to need to be very fast on this one because we release it on Father's Day in the UK. But if you're around the Bletchley Park area, as I say, you might want to take Dad, or say if you are a dad in amateur radio, you can suggest the kids take you along to a day filled with activities at the National Radio Centre at Bletchley Park. So say lots to do, including an opportunity to become a spy hunter using a special gadget, and we'll be looking for hidden transmitters located around Bletchley Park. You need to decode some Morse code signal to uncover the location of a secret spy base. There's a couple of slots available, but groups are limited to 12, so you're going to need to jump on this one fast if it's still available. But as I say, it could be a nice day out for Father's Day in the UK. As I say, that one there for you. In Ireland, Ham Radio Ireland magazine is a e-magazine published every second month. It's Ireland's only independent freelance amateur radio magazine geared towards all radio and electronic experimenters. Each month they include all facets of the hobby, including CB, PMR 446 and POC radio information, in addition, of course, to the usual ham radio articles. So, as I say, certainly as a very popular e-magazine, be worthwhile checking this out for you. We're going to pop a link to this again on the ICQ Podcast webpage for you, so you can check out this magazine, available not only for Irish hams, but also for hams around the world. So if you want to keep an eye on what's going on in Ireland, be a good magazine for you to check out. Right, now we're going to head over to our features episode, and this episode's feature is looking at the Xiegu G90 1 year on. I hope you enjoy.
And now for this episode's feature from the ICQ Podcast.
Hi guys, for this episode's feature, I'm going back in time a little bit. I want to talk about my Xiegu G90, which I've had for just over a year. And you're mostly going to go, so what? It's a Chinese radio. I understand where you're coming from. But let's start by putting it a little bit in perspective. I often do HF as a QRP operator. I don't get many contacts because I'm not throwing out millions of watts of power. However, I have great fun doing QRP. Now, I used to own an ICOM IC703. Lovely radio. In many ways, I wished I hadn't sold it, but that life moves on. I also had two Yaesu FT817NDs. I still own one of them, but one I sold off. And I had two BitX20s, which went to somebody who wanted BitX20s and was going to use them more than I will. So I've kind of played with various HF radios, and also in the shack often turn my main rigs down to low power. Now, I lost interest a little bit in HF, and that's why I sold my ICOM 703 and one of my FT817s. Then, about a year ago, I started to get a bit more interested and thought, well, I'd like to go out and do some portable work. So I looked around and thought, well, I need something, but I don't necessarily need the most expensive radio on the market, because if I get bored again, I'm just going to sell it off. Well, that wasn't the case. I looked around and I spoke to Ed Durrant DD5LP, and I know he'd had great success with his Xiegu G90. So I thought, well, let's have a look at those. So I had a good look around the internet for the best price, obviously, because I'm an amateur, and found that if you ordered it from China, you got a slightly better price, but we'll talk about that in a minute. So what is a Xiegu G90? Well, effectively, it's a QRP HF rig from China. And that pretty much sums it up. It's HF only. Now, the spec of it is, the various modes it will do is upper sideband, upper sideband digital, lower sideband digital, CW, CWR, AM and FM. So it's pretty much got the whole range of modes you want to use. Along with that, the receive current when it's running and it's on receive is about 700 milliamps, which is, as good as many of the others on receive. On transmit, if you're running at 20 watts, because the Xiegu G90 does 20, you're drawing about 6 amps. So it's not undoable to take a battery out with you, and some of these new LiPo 4 batteries can certainly give you quite a bit of operation time. Now on receive, it'll receive from about 500 kilohertz up to 30 megahertz, which is a quite nice receive range. Transmit, I've broken it down into amateur bands. It does the top band 160 meters, 80 meters, 60 meters, 40 meters, 30 meters, 20 meters, 17 meters, 15 meters, 12 meters and 10 meters. And that is a total of 10 bands. So you're 10 bands in the box. So what do you get when you get your little Xiegu out of the box? Well, obviously you get the Xiegu G90 itself. You get a microphone and a cable. Great. So you get a power cable. You get a programming cable, which is very, very useful. The programming cable can also be used as a CAT cable, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. and you get a remote head cable. Now, the remote head cable is you can unscrew a couple of screws, take the head off the unit, and if you're going to fit it in the car or under the desk or whatever, you can just end up with a small head unit for you to operate the radio and put the rest of the radio somewhere else. And in with it, you get a manual. Now, the manual's okay, but we'll talk about this in a little while. In the UK, the cost for a new one in the UK is around £450. If you buy it from China, you can possibly get it £100 cheaper for £350. What I will say is, if you buy it from a dealer in the UK, they're obligated to give you a year's warranty on it. If you get it from China, I'm not sure what the warranty is. Now, in fairness, when I got mine from China, my microphone didn't work. It didn't work. And it turned out to be a faulty microphone cable. Now, I diagnosed it. Some of you would have been able to do that. Some might not have been able to do that. I actually diagnosed it, emailed the gentleman in China or the company in China, and they sent me on express delivery a microphone cable. So mine's up and working, no problems at all. What I have mentioned possibly before, but equally I'll mention it again because it is useful, is if you are using this little radio to do a demonstration, or you're doing a demonstration like putting people on the air, like we do with the Scouts, Jota, and you want to put Scouts on the air, maybe you want a longer microphone cable. Turns out you can actually use a computer Cat5 cable instead of the microphone cable. Now, it isn't all pretty with the twisty curly bits on, but it works perfectly well, and you can have a 10-foot microphone cable on it if you want. So that's another option. So warranty, yeah, is it worth £100? That is your call. Now, accessories, not many accessories. There are a few for it you can buy as extras. I bought the stand with a temperature controlled fan because I thought if I'm out and about in the field, what I want to do is keep it cool, and if it's on a hot summer's day. Now, I don't think that was my best purchase because the radio doesn't get as hot as I thought it might, but it's worthwhile anyway. Temperature control fan. If you want to go into the digital modes, well, they make a nice digital interface. You don't have to use it. You can make your own cables up and do it your own way, but they make a nice digital interface called a CE-19, which is a data modes interface, and I've just had one of those arrive. I'm hoping to give it a good play fairly soon. So, yeah, all in fairness, that's what you get in the box and the accessories. Now, I'll obviously be asked by people, what are the good points about this radio? What would you say the good points? Well, okay, price obviously is a good point. Performance. It performs very, very well. You can't beat it for the price. It's a very, very effective radio. Works well on air. It has an auto ATU, which is absolutely brilliant. I mean, I would suggest that the auto ATU would probably even tune a bit of wet string. Haven't tried it, don't suggest you do, but it seems to tune just about anything. It has a small colour display, and the colour display is very, very good on it. Even me that needs glasses, it's not too difficult, and it's good on the eyes. Nice waterfall display, which is good. The microphone has multi-buttons on it, so you can, if you're sitting with a group of you, as I said earlier, say me doing Jota on the air, you can change things from the microphone, which is quite nice. It can also decode Morse. If you're in the Morse mode and you want to set it up, you set it up and it will actually decode Morse and display it across the bottom of the screen while you're in Morse mode. And equally, if you're somebody who likes Vox, and I must admit I don't, but if you like Vox, it has Vox built in. It also has a built-in SWR scanner, so you can tell it to tell you how bad your antenna is or how good it is. Now, obviously, the ATU will make it okay, or make it the radio think it's okay, but it will show you where the good parts of your antenna are. And as I said earlier, the programming cable that comes with it in the box is also a CAT cable, so you can use it with third-party software to control the rig and do all sorts of nice bits and pieces with it. Bad points? Yeah, well, there's bad points on everything. Well, I suppose I can't moan too much for the price, but there's no 6 metres. Most HF rigs gave you 6 metres. There's no 6 metres, no 4 metres, no 2 metres, or 70 sems. Yeah, well, I think if I wanted all those, I'd want the earth, certainly at the price. The other thing that you need to be aware of is there is no external loudspeaker socket. So if you have headphones, there's a headphone socket but no loudspeaker socket. Now, one of the things I found out very early, and I've informed a number of people on this, and certainly some of the accessory manufacturers, is if you plug a loudspeaker into the headphone socket, you short the audio out. Reason being is the headphone socket uses stereo, and the tip and the ring are shorted together within the radio. So if you short the tip and ring together, you get mono audio on your headphones. However, if you take out a stereo plug and you plug a mono plug in, the mono plug shorts out the ring. And because the tip and ring are joined together, it shorts all the audio out. So if you're going to put a loudspeaker in, use a stereo loudspeaker plug and use the tip and the earth ring as normal, and don't put anything on the ring connector. Right, there are firmware upgrades available on the internet, and I would suggest you go to the latest firmware. There are some very good manuals on the internet. The one that comes in the box is somewhat basic. If you go to the Radio Odyssey website in the States where they sell this unit, the manual from Radio Odyssey is much, much clearer, much, much nicer, and I know that our podcast presenter Ed Durrant had a fair amount of work involved in putting that together. So it is a great thing to make sure that your firmware's up to date, but they also have the right manuals. And there's lots of documentation on the internet. Just make sure that you've got the right manual for the firmware release you've got. Otherwise, you might be tearing your hair out. Right, in use. Well, a few of our club members have one of these radios, as well as people I talk to have had them. And when I got mine, I was a bit open, sceptical a little bit, but I thought, let's give it a try. Well, I've managed to work the States and most of Europe on very, very simple antennas. In fact, I can do Europe fairly easily on just a mobile whip on top of the car. So, it works very, very well. I don't do Morse, which is a real shame, I know, and some of you are going to get very upset with me. However, took the radio to the club the other week, and one of the Morse guys, who's big into Morse, put a key on the back and set it up for Morse, and he had a big smile ear to ear, and he said, yeah, I'm really impressed with that. So even though I don't do it, the radio does it very, very well. And is it living up to expectations? Yeah, I think it is. It does everything I want when I go out and about. Now, I'm going to be honest and be fair on this. It's not the only QRP rig on the market. And if you only want to do HF, this is a great performer at the price. However, Yaesu have just released a new QRP rig. ICOM have got their IC705. Both lovely rigs. Don't own either of them. I've seen them in or seen some of them in operation. But it's down to you. I wouldn't knock either of those. It's just for what I need to do and what I want to do, this little Xiegu G90 ticks pretty much every box I want to do when I want to go out and do HF in the field or mobile. So, I think I've been fair. I think it's a great product. Long may it stay there. And guys, not everything that comes out of China is rubbish. This certainly isn't. I hope this was of interest.
The ICQ Amateur Ham Radio Podcast, serving the amateur ham radio community fortnightly since 2008.
Well, everybody, I really hope you enjoyed our look at the Xiegu G90, and as I say, having a look at that radio 1 year on and how, as I say, Martin's getting on with the radio there. As always, we'd appreciate your feedback, comments, etc., and you can contact us via the usual ways, either by the ICQPodcast website or via various social media angles, so feel free to drop us a line there. As mentioned, I'm sure one or two times today, say release date is Father's Day. So say if you're a radio father, or say you have a father in your life that would get something from radio, please make sure you take this opportunity to introduce to our hobby with some of the events that will be going on for say Father's Day, and say hopefully we'll hook say a few more people interested in our hobby in that process. It'll be wonderful. Now, obviously, we can't do this show without the support of our wonderful donors, our monthly subscription donors. We'd really like to thank them. I say they see value in what we do, and they send us a contribution. And I say it's fantastic of them to do it because it keeps the show advert-free and being produced for you. If you found value from today's show, we ask you to do the same thing. All you have to do is go to ICQPodcast.com/donate. And to say anything you send our way is greatly appreciated. It goes into the running of the show, and it says a great way for you to show your value for the ICQ podcast. So please do consider us. We'd also like to thank Dan KB6 Uniform, Caryn KD2 Golf Uniform Tango, Edmund Mike 0 Mike November Golf, and Ed DD5LP Papa for taking part in the news roundtable. Many thanks, guys, for your time, your thoughts, and your opinions. Really do appreciate that. Right, well, on the next episode, we'll be heading down to Germany for our Friedrichshafen Ham Radio 2025. Really hope we get to see as many of you as we can at that show that weekend. We actually released that weekend, so we'll be editing and recording our way down to that show. And I say it's a fantastic event in Germany, so certainly looking forward to seeing you all, and certainly seeing some of my presenters I haven't seen for a few months, in some cases a couple of years. So really looking forward to that time there and that show there. Right, what is left for me to do is to bid you all 73s, continue to enjoy our wonderful hobby, and we look forward to, being with you again in a fortnight's time, and maybe even seeing you in the flesh at Friedrichshafen. So we look forward to that all. 73s all, bye-bye.